Which Side Podcast is a proud member of the Which Side Media Collective.
This week's episode is brought to us by Charlotte Malrich. She said that we could shout out whatever we want, so this week we want to shout out Black Lives Matter.
This is a movement that can't die. We've got to continue to focus on it. So if you know of anything that's going on in your area, get involved. Go to the demonstrations. Do whatever you can to help out.
I know that it seems like, the police brutality demonstrations might have died down a little bit. People have forgotten, but it's still happening. The same shit's still happening every day, and it's not over yet. So we need to go out there and make our voices heard.
It's just not fucking okay, period. And we gotta let that be known that it's not okay. If there isn't anything going on in your local area, if you don't have any other resources, check out blacklivesmatter.com. Hopefully that can help you get in a direction of getting something going for your local area.
If you'd like to sponsor an episode, all we ask is you donate at least $10. That's how much it costs us to make each episode. So that's all that we ask from you. You can go to whichsidepodcast.com and click on the donate tab.
This is episode 124.
Yeah, we have Kim Socha on. She wrote the book Animal Liberation and Atheism.
She's also an educator. We have a lot of fun talking to her. It goes a little long because it's one of those conversations we just get carried away in and you get really deep into and just love to have. So stay tuned for that. It's a lot of fun. What news and events do we have going on this week?
I'm going to ask everybody who's listening, if you have not yet liked us on Facebook, followed us on Instagram, or followed us on Twitter, that you do so. If you have any of those accounts, just help us out. You like listening to our show? Find out some more stuff that we don't talk about on the show.
I just barely started following us on Instagram.
Go to whichsidepodcast.com, click on the social tab, and find out all the ways that you can get involved with us online.
For the slingshot this week, March 26, 1981. I was born in 81. I wasn't alive yet when this happened, but that means 33 years ago. The very first Food Not Bombs serves food outside Banker and Nuke's meeting in Boston. 33 years they've been going strong.
How does it feel to know that you started Food Not Bombs?
Well, I was in utero at that time. If I'm doing my math correctly. So, I was pretty instrumental in starting it.
Congrats.
Feels pretty good, man.
Congrats.
Feels pretty good. If you like these every week, I just pull these out of our Slingshot personal organizer. I love it. Support them. Go get one. You can help organize your life and get these fun little tidbits. They don't sponsor us. We just really like them. You can get them at a local info shop or an online info shop like AK Press.
If you don't have a local info shop, you can start your own.
From the bottom of my heart, enjoy this episode.
Which side are you on? Which side are you on? Which side are you on? Which side? Which side are you on? 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 Which side are you on?
So, how's your day going so far?
Oh, not too bad. Just finished some grading. That's kind of been my morning, So,
I've always been curious about grading. Do you ever just be like, I just don't like this person, fuck them? I mean, obviously
Yes.
You can't say that, but...
well, no, as long as this won't be on the radio show, that has happened. I'm having students, especially right now, write about food ethics, and most of them choose to write about animal issues. And some of the papers are very difficult to read.
What did some of them say? If you can, we can cut this if you want. This is not a big deal. I'm just totally curious.
No. I was like, really, I didn't know what to do. My partner is also an English teacher, and I actually had to go to him to get he's vegan as well. But to get his perspective, I had a student basically saying that, and the horrible argument. I don't know what your perspectives are on animal rights and stuff, but just the bad argument that because plants are alive, we shouldn't care how animals are treated and just be able to eat them without worrying about it. And I just kind of lost my shit.
So that's like the opposite of that I used to have in school, because being vegan and going through especially high school, and I would question things. And I remember I was taking a sociology class, and it was like the introduction to the idea of socialization. And so I did a little, piece, being 16, of how the idea of nutrition is socialized to believe that one way is right over another way. And they had to call the principal in to see if I could continue my presentation, because they're like, this is too controversial.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah. Yeah. It was interesting because like one of the things I was saying was like, the basic, the, what do you call it? The paperwork and everything else is donated to the schools by like the Dairy Council and things like that. And they're like, that can't be true. They actually made me go down to the health department and get the documentation where it says like, this is from they're like, oh my God, this is true. I'm like, yeah, this is fucking ridiculous.
How long ago was that? I mean, you'd think that sounds like something from like the 1950s or something.
16 years ago.
Oh, wow. Okay. Yeah.
But I mean, this is rural Utah. So, I mean.
Yeah. Yeah. I guess it does. Geography means a lot.
And, it's changed a lot, rural Utah. Since then, I can get vegan cheese now at my grocery store.
That is yes, that's a bonus, right? How far we've come.
So how do you deal with that with your students? Do you ever confront them and be like, we need to rethink this ideology, or can you do that?
Well, I can't. Well, I guess what I'm lucky about is, the ones that make such arguments like that, they're just so poorly argued that it really gives me the ability to point out flaws in their arguments. Mm-hmm. I'm much more. Yeah, I don't judge them for their beliefs. Like I don't, but so often I've just seen them just horribly argued. So the ones, and I've actually never seen maybe it's me again, I've never seen a good paper that hasn't, a good paper that took this, who cares about animal ethics at all. Even people who are unapologetic meat eaters will say, at least acknowledge, well, yes, I do care. It bothers me, but this is why I continue to do it. It's the rare paper, which this one is I just don't give a shit, basically, if animals are hurt. And that's the one where I'm like, well, you're not arguing ethics then. So I think I said you're a moral nihilist and you have to write from that perspective. So I'm curious how he's going to respond.
But that mindset is always the people that I've just been like, yeah, I'm not even going to talk to you anymore. Because it's almost, if you're having like a one-on-one conversation, it's just, it's like a brick wall at that point.
Yeah. And it's one of those things where, as a composition teacher, I get to decide what the kind of the themes are of my class. Mm-hmm. So I've been I like to mix it up just so I don't get bored too, though. And I've been doing the food thing now for I usually go 4 semesters and then I kind of switch it up. So I might be switching it up, which I think that'll be a break for me too. So I don't have to, read things that I just find just so morally offensive and ethically inexcusable.
Do your students ever confront you on it? Like, you're only doing this because you think it's wrong.
Well, this is the funny thing. This is the one semester, although I think some of them know because they look me up. I was trying something new. I usually tell them right off the bat, like, oh, I'm a vegan and I do animal rights activism. And some of the reviews that I've gotten, like evaluations, have it's very rare, but at least one per semester shows up since I've been doing this theme is, I really feel like she pushes her vegan views on people. She tries to, and one said, it was, what did you not like about the course? And it was, she made me feel guilty for eating meat. And I'm like, I didn't. All I did was give you resources. That's the reality. Or, she has an agenda or something. So what I do now is I bring in an outside speaker. I don't mention, although, again, I know a few people look me up, but I don't mention how much I'm invested in this perspective And I'm curious if any of those comments are going to show up, because we talk about lots of different things and have different perspectives on lots of different issues. But when it comes to challenging, the human right to eat animals, it brings out a very kind of like vitriolic side of people. And, a lot of teachers are accused of inflicting their beliefs. But I also feel like, well, to pretend that I don't have biases would just be disingenuous. So, another area where it's been really difficult is reading papers that are opposed to gay marriage, because they're just, the arguments are so poor, and it always comes down, in my experience, it's always about religion. And I tell them you have to argue against separation between church and state if that's what you're going to do. And then they just cite these random like blog posts and stuff about, people who say, if you raise children and you have two dads or two moms, the child has a higher risk of suicide. It's like, well, yeah, because we live in a world that makes them feel bad for having gay parents. If we didn't live in that world, that would change. And so those are the two topics I have the most trouble with. And I think the arguments are just so invalid most of the time.
Do you ever broach the topic of like the patriarchy with your students, and do they have the same type of vitriol with that?
Not as much, because I teach at basically general education courses, like a freshman comp is my big one, and then literature courses, and I teach at a community college. And this isn't an insult to people who go to community college. I would say it about any freshman coming in. There are certain things that they're not ready to. It would be too confounding to them for me to, I guess, be too heavy-handed with some of those issues. So, like, sometimes people ask, like, how come you don't use your books in your classes? And I'm like, it would be completely inappropriate to use some of them in a freshman composition class, where the ultimate goal is to teach people rhetoric and proper writing skills. Mm-hmm. If it was a philosophy class, that might be a little bit different. But yeah, I do bring it up. I make sure I don't ignore it, but I kind of put it in maybe less direct terms than I would if I was teaching like a graduate level course or teaching people in a certain major or something of that nature. Plus, I'm an English teacher, so it's, things I write about are not about English, which is kind of funny. So my... I'm not a women's studies teacher or a philosophy teacher, so I just have to find these kind of tricky ways, I guess, to bring in uncomfortable topics for students.
How does the administration feel about that?
I have to say they are really. My dean is so supportive. I mean, he is a hardcore Catholic, and he came, I did a colloquium presentation. I was in an anthology called Atheist Voices of Minnesota. And, he came and was very open-minded. He even bought a copy of the book to give to his son, who's questioning Catholicism. And then my dean recently emailed me and said, I saw you did a TV interview about atheism. I really like what you had to say. And I'm like, oh, well, that's good. And it's funny. I recently had to cancel a class because I had to go to court for a protesting arrest, and I was trying to keep it secret, but I went out for some drinks with some colleagues, and, my tongue got a little loose, and I explained why. And they're like, that's awesome. You should be telling everybody. We would admire you more, since you're not it's not going to court for drunk driving or something like that. So I'm like, well, I still don't, there are certain very conservative elements of the administration. So I'm not ashamed of it, but I don't want to go advertising it, to everyone who will listen. So,
but now you have to explain to us what that arrest was.
Oh yeah. I don't know if you guys heard about the Mall of America, the big event in December.
Yeah.
The Black Lives Matter event. Mm-hmm. There were 36 people arrested. I was one of them. So there's the core 11 organizers who are facing more harsher charges. They're facing, no one's going to get jail time. I mean, that's kind of a given. They just say it. They're facing up to 2 years in jail and like a $7,000 fine. And I got a criminal trespassing charge because I wouldn't leave when I was told to disperse. And that's like a $1,000 fine or 90 days in jail. And again, the jail time's it's not going to happen. And what my lawyer, who's pro bono, thankfully, is going to do is we're just going to keep fighting it. And he thinks that they might just get so tired of it that they can either drop the charges, although the county prosecutor is really trying to be a hard ass about it. But he just said, let's just keep pleading not guilty and see where it goes. Like he became a lawyer and has like a day job, but he really became a lawyer so he could work with activists. Mm-hmm. And he hates when he sees activists making deals. And he said in his experience, they make deals as often as non-activists do. So he's really supportive in that. Asking me, are you willing to go, never accept any deals? And I'm like, sure. I say this now. Who knows what's going to happen, but that's my plan, is to just fight it. It's
a very long road to fight.
It is.
I mean,
it is, absolutely.
Jordan had an infraction that took 3 years.
No, I think it was 2007 to 2011. It finally got dropped.
Yeah, pleading not guilty to an infraction. So I mean, you're talking like nothing.
I mean, that's one thing. Like, it's just the wheels of justice, in air quotes, are so slow. I went to, the courthouse, and I didn't even have to go in. Now I have another date in May. And I mean, this could go on. It could go on for years, exactly like you experienced.
Well, I'm always curious about mall protests, because I believe in the state of California, they fought it to the Supreme Court of California, where they're now allowed to do protests inside of malls, even though they're public property.
Yeah, it's very tricky. I mean, I don't know what tactic the lawyers are going to take, because they're trying to figure out, okay, there's 36 people. How are we going to do this? And there, the Mall of America gets big tax breaks. Mm-hmm. There's this saying a mall, especially in chilly Minnesota, is the public square. So there is a sense of, okay, we somehow with our taxpayer money paid for this monstrous place. We have a right to be there as a place. This is the new community forum. Like, the Mall of America was so funny. They were like, okay, we'll let you protest, but they wanted us to put us, again, I wasn't an organizer, but they wanted us to go on like a patch of land where nobody would see us outside, which completely would defeat the purpose. Yeah.
I hate the whole idea of protest zones or these free speech zones, and it's so ridiculous.
Yeah, there's our local airport. It's kind of funny because we do some protests there against Delta, and the MSP airport. It's kind of cute. I never heard of it. They have freedom of information booths where you could just not rent, it's free. You just get to sit at the booth and give out literature and inform people and things like that. But we try to do it all over the airport.
Hold on. So anyone can go get a booth and give out information?
Yeah. I know the only other group I know who does it are the Jehovah's Witnesses. And then, my animal rights cohort.
Is it the bunny? That you're doing there?
It's it's kind of based on their model. So we use all their material because they're like, yeah, use whatever. But we basically doing it with Progress for Science is the name of the group. But they have very close working relationship with the Bunny Alliance and Gate Health.
I wonder if more airports do that. I've never heard of an airport just giving you. Is it like in a goods place where people are actually trafficking?
It's in baggage claim, which isn't bad because people have to, and it's across from where Delta's bags are pickers, people flying Delta. So that, in that sense, it's kind of beneficial, but we push to be able to stand by ticketing doors to give out literature too. So we just kind of try to divide and conquer when we go there. And so we'll be at the drop-off point, the baggage claim, and then hold a banner or something as cars come in.
I guess ideally you would want it as they're coming in because they can get literature and then they're bored while they're waiting for their plane and actually read it.
Yeah, you would hope.
Yeah.
You would hope that they don't just take it and throw it in the trash. I hate
happens,
seeing that.
unfortunately.
Oh yeah, like after leafleting or something, seeing like the leaflets scattered all about the city streets or something like that.
Pick them up.
You go. Pick them up.
Yeah, that's what we do.
Yeah.
I haven't been leafleting in absolutely years. Actually, it's.
I'm not a big leafleter. We do it at protests, but I don't just go leaflet for the sake of leafleting.
My daughter's been pushing us to do it, and I always feel bad because I'm always that, let's find better ways of being an activist. She's like, but this is what I want to do.
Oh, that's great that she wants to do it, though.
Yeah, I just need to be a better parent and do it.
I'm sure you're a fine parent.
So one of the things that interests me about your work is that you tie it all this in and then tie it in with atheism also. And I'm an atheist, but I've never viewed atheism as being something to be activist about, if that makes sense. Yeah.
And I have to admit, I have to say I've not been much. The local community, what they do is they'll have like a day of reason at the courthouse. They will, they'll march in the local May Day parade. And they will, if there's, for example, when they made gay marriage legal in Minnesota, the atheist community made sure. So it's like anytime there's a separation between church and state issue, they'll try to set something up. But basically, it really isn't activism in the way like you think about animal or environmental activism. It's more like informational. Like they don't have big rallies or things like that.
So what brought you to atheism? Were you raised atheist or were you raised religious?
No, I was raised Catholic and was quite, it's hard not to be serious about Catholicism when you're drilled into your head. And I'd say it was in my college years at a Catholic college. I took a class in world religion. And that was really my first. I knew other religions existed, but it was my first introduction to this idea of there are other religions that are not Christ-based, and they actually sounded better or nicer in some sense than like Buddhism, for example. And I was taught that if you aren't baptized, you'll go to hell. So, and I would learn about these people who seem like good people. And I started to question, well, why would a just God send someone to hell? Especially like even people who never heard of Jesus. They never have the opportunity to be baptized, but because they weren't baptized. I don't know if this is still the official stance of the Catholic Church. That's just like, God, that doesn't make any rational or ethical or moral sense. So I really started to question first Catholicism, and then that led to just questioning religion in general. So this was and then I was kind of apathetic, like, okay, I don't believe in God, but it doesn't really mean much. I don't think about it. And it was only really when I became an animal rights activist about 6 years ago that I really started to think of religion as a harm. And it would frustrate me when I don't really work with a specific local group now, but I was, and they were like, okay, we're going to do outreach at the, Women's Religious Forum or Crusaders for Christ or something like that. And we're going to hand out pamphlets from the Christian Vegetarian Society. And it really bothered me because I felt like it was just, we were lying to people. So I would never go to those. I'm like, well, no, that's not true. I mean, we really have to distort religion to argue that our version of animal liberation, which is more of an abolitionist perspective, religion, it doesn't lend itself to that. So that's, I think, when I started making that direct connection and just seeing religion as a harm and not something that should just be ignored. I have
a really hard time with religion, and maybe it's just because being raised Mormon in a very religious environment. It's like, I don't know how to describe it, and I almost don't want to touch it. Like, I don't want to argue against it. I don't want to argue for it. I think it's wrong, but I always find myself feeling like almost have to. Maybe it's like, maybe I could explain it better this way. So with Mormons, they're fucking wrong on everything. There's nothing good about Mormonism.
I know they're
right.
I say a few things in my book about like a few snide remarks.
I always find myself, people will say things that I know are not true about Mormons, and I'm like, I want to defend them. Like, that's not true. They're fucking bad, but that's not true.
Yeah, they're not that bad.
No, they are that bad. Just not with what you're saying. I don't know if that makes sense. Like, I always feel like almost a little bit defensive about things still.
Well, I mean, it is our family that we're talking about too.
It is, yeah.
You're naturally defensive of your family. So.
Sure. Yeah. And I think like my family is, they've like my dad is the one who had us go to church every Sunday. My brother and my mom didn't go, but she was a believer. So now it's like, he's not even religious anymore. So my family's not especially religious. So it makes it kind of easy to, like, I don't feel that it's my culture or my family being, like negatively represented because no one in my family is really religious. They go to church, like my brother, they go to some kind of Protestant church now just for community because they think you can't get it anywhere else but a church. But yeah, I definitely don't take offense because I think it sounds like you have more of that family connection and my family's not really religious.
There is no such thing as a non-religious Mormon. You're either like really religious or super fucking religious.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and those are the spectrum, right?
Yeah, that's the expect. Yeah,
it's pretty true.
Yeah, to say like I couldn't even feign to say my parents aren't religious. And as far as like Mormonism goes, they're on the lower end. Mm-hmm. But if you're from the outside looking in, you're like, holy shit, they're fucking crazy religious.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Have you guys seen the Book of Mormon, the play or the Broadway show?
Jordan has. I haven't yet, but I will as soon as it comes to Utah.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Jordan, what did you think of it?
Absolutely hilarious.
Oh yeah, I thought it was brilliant. Like, yeah.
There's so many inside things to it. Like, I
think Kolob is one of the funniest things in there.
Yeah. But just, I mean, like just the dancing coffee cups, like that's such an inside thing that it's just hilarious. Because, I mean, just the other day, my mom criticized me for drinking coffee. She told me it was a gateway drug.
Yeah, it's a slippery slope.
I mean,
wow,
that's Mormonism for you.
Yeah,
that's the spooky Mormon hell dream. Is you think that you got a Starbucks coffee? It's spooky.
It is.
Yeah, I've never. I mean, I guess an argument could be made for that, but I've never heard that one before.
Yeah, to take that to another level, I was a couple years ago in another part of Utah for work, and I asked them where the nearest coffee house was, and they laughed at me. They're like, it's like 100 miles away. I'm like,
wow, I had no idea that there was such a stigma.
Oh, yeah, it's crazy. Like drinking, if you are holding a coffee cup, to them it's the same as like shooting heroin almost.
Yeah.
Well, you might as well get a better high and shoot heroin if it's all the same.
Right. But it's funny because what it creates this dissident where people are like, well, I want to do this one thing, so I might as well just go all the way out, you know? And so it creates this huge backlash towards people, you know, rebelling against their religion. They go really, really far a lot of the times because it's all seems equal, you know?
Right.
Yeah.
That's funny.
Because if you're going to hell, you're going to hell. Yeah,
I had no idea about the coffee thing. Wow.
It's based on a loose scripture in the Word of Wisdom where you should abstain from hot drinks.
Well, they specifically mentioned tea and then hot drinks, but for some reason tea doesn't have as bad of a stigma as coffee does.
Even decaffeinated coffee? I guess that's still a hot drink.
Well, they get really weird because they drink caffeine, just not in coffee.
Oh.
Yeah, really...
Like, you can drink a Coke, but...
I mean,
yeah, it doesn't make any sense from the outside.
It doesn't make any sense.
Interesting. Just don't heat up your Coca-Cola or anything, I guess.
Well, yeah. There are the super religious that abstain from Coke even.
There is even the super religious that will abstain from like hot chocolate, not because it's hot, because people might think it's coffee.
Oh no, that's
Yeah, like
wow.
we're focusing on Mormonism a little bit. I remember growing up listening to like every 6 months they have what's called a general conference. I don't know if you are aware of that, but it's where the leadership of the church talks to the whole entire congregation. So it would be like the president, or what they call the prophet, and then like his minions will come out and talk to everyone, right? And I remember a speech where they're like, if you're at a cafe and you order hot chocolate, make sure you ask for it in a cup that's not a mug, so it doesn't look like it's coffee.
That is some serious straight edge. Or Mormons kind of they don't drink alcohol either.
Yeah.
How about like prescription drugs?
Well,
this is where it gets really weird because we have really high usage of prescription drugs here. Like we're also like the highest consumer of pornography. I think we're the highest consumer of gay pornography too. If you look at the statistics, we're up there really high.
Oh,
but it's because it's so looked upon that they have to go to these avenues to be themselves.
Yeah.
Not that there's anything wrong with gay pornography. I'm not saying that.
Oh, there's nothing wrong, unless you're looking at it and also saying that it's evil and whatnot in another sense.
Yeah. It's really interesting to see it. But what it does is it creates the communities that are not Mormon here. They really stick together really well. Like we have a really thriving, gay rights community that correlates with a whole bunch of other communities, and any like dissident community seems to like, correlate really well with each other. And there's lots of, crossover because of it. Because we all have this huge anti-Mormon, like we're not Mormons, so we're together kind of an idea.
Very interesting. Yeah, I find Mormonism really bad. I mean, but it's one of those things where like people, let's say, will make fun of Mormonism or Scientology or something. And yes, I mean, let's say Scientology, of course, it's so silly, but nothing that Scientologists believe in is any weirder. The fact that there were, I guess, aliens that lived on the planet at one point, and people like a Christian might just laugh like that is so absurd, but a virgin birth and someone rising from the dead, that's completely rational. That's what frustrates. It's just because something is newer to people, it sounds really strange.
Yeah. Yeah.
But so when I see people making fun of religions and they are religious, I actually get defensive for that religion. So I oddly sometimes will find myself defending Scientology, like basically defending it by saying, no, it's just as messed up as any other religion. And you're just not used to hearing. It's just unfamiliar to you.
Yeah, I get that with like a lot of religions, like I was saying before, especially with Mormonism, though. But I always feel like I always have to point out to people, like, they're all fucked up. Let's just acknowledge that, like, from the outset. So you were atheist before you were introduced to animal rights, but were you vegan at that point, or like what introduced you to veganism?
I went vegan only in 2009. I was vegetarian, and I just for many of the reasons that people don't go vegan is just, they talk about cognitive dissonance, and I really just force myself to believe something I didn't really believe, which is that, it doesn't do any harm. I tried to go vegan. I'm like, it seems too hard. I'm really not, I'm good as far as like, cheese and eggs and stuff like that. And then it just got to the point where I made that connection, and I couldn't like live in that state of delusion anymore, that what I was doing wasn't as damaging, I think, as eating meat. I actually think if we wanted to argue like this idea of what's natural or not natural, I mean, eating meat to me actually seems more natural than eating dairy products, like the reproductive products of other animals. I think humans are the only species who do that.
To my knowledge, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's so strange to think of when you actually break it down for what it is, it just seems exceptionally cruel and strange to take milk that's meant for one species of offspring and steal it for another species. And I know, like, you know, years ago, as part of one of their publicity stunts, which they're good at, PETA was trying to get Ben and Jerry's to have like a breast milk ice cream, and people were just horrified, and just human breast milk ice cream, and people were so disgusted by the idea, as if drinking the milk of your own species is some kind of aberration against nature. And I just remember thinking, like, that, what? Like, no. Think about taking milk from another species and claiming it as your own. That's the unnatural, what seems most unnatural.
It is a strange disconnect for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But to be fair,
Like,
I would
yeah.
probably try human milk ice cream.
No. I'm good with.
Well, that's the thing. I probably wouldn't want to either. But the idea of, actually, now that I've been vegan, like, you know, I certain foods I don't really look at as food anymore. Like, you know, cheese tastes good, but when I see it, I don't crave it or think that my Dea or whatever is an exact replica of that. But it doesn't seem even like a food product to me, which is a good place to be, because people, vegans, just sit around like with trying to find meat analogs because we all just want to eat bacon so much, or cheese.
Yeah, it's so much so now that it's not even like a question. It's just, well, that's just not food. Like, there's no want there whatsoever.
Yeah, there's not, you know, and when people say, oh, you can't, I forgot you can't eat that, I like to say, no, I actually don't want to. So when I've been asked at different forums, I've been asked the question, well, what about in vitro meat? Like, what do you think of that? And I'm like, you know, if you can create meat to the extent that human beings want to, you know, especially Westerners want to consume it and not devastate the planet and slaughter animals, like, I don't have a problem with that, but I still wouldn't want to eat it. You know, there's not that sense of, it's not appealing to me to I wouldn't want to eat something that tastes like real bacon. So there's not this, like, I'm just waiting for these, you know, replications to appear. To me, it's not food, and it's not, even if it was from a lab and it was humane or whatever, I wouldn't want to be part of it.
That's kind of where I'm at too. I think the only, like, thing that is lab created that I might be interested in is that, like, real vegan cheese that they're working on. Like,
You just want the narwhal cheese.
Yeah, that sounds interesting. It's like a.
I don't know about this.
They're genetically modifying, like, yeast to
secrete each individual. I don't want to say amino acid because that's part of it, but everything that's in real dairy. So most specifically the casein. They're trying to get the casein because that's what creates that stretchy, elasticy feel to cheese.
Yeah.
So they're getting yeast to secrete casein, and then they're growing that and pretty much making a real dairy product without an animal.
That's interesting. I mean, I know some vegans who don't. Well, maybe I should say I know one who doesn't eat yeast products. So
really, I've never met somebody who doesn't eat yeast.
I've heard of it.
I've heard of it, but I always thought it was that joking, like, ha ha ha.
Like, what about plants? Don't they feel pain?
Yeah. No. So really, what is their disconnect with yeast? So obviously, they won't eat yeast of any kind, right?
Yeah, the person I'm thinking of,
You don't need to name them.
No, the person I'm thinking of has an eating disorder, and I think that's more associated with an eating disorder.
Okay.
Not that the ethics aren't there, but
okay, so how would the ethics be there? Explain that one to me.
And I remember talking to her, and what I said is, but you realize as a vegan that you kill, that animals die for you to live, right? You know, and the least of your concern should be yeast in your bread. It should maybe be, where is my carrot coming from? Is it from, or an avocado? Am I going to buy an avocado? Which I do, I admit. In Minnesota, I buy avocados. Like, it just seemed kind of focusing on this very minute issue. So what I did is just try to, I really do try to, I feel this need to clarify even to some vegans, but mostly to non-vegans who make assumptions about what we think, that yes, we absolutely are like we don't get to live without causing death.
Yeah.
So I think once you accept that, you say, well, what's, the best thing to do would probably be to, like, I think of one example that I sometimes give is if you want to say what is the most sustainable way to live, if we're going to think about the planet and the number of animals killed, it would be to move out of the industrialized West completely and go live in Papua New Guinea or something and hunt your own boar for dinner. I don't, or whatever. Like if, and actually not factory farming, you would actually, you would have less of an environmental impact by doing that. But people aren't going to do that, luckily for the Papua New Guineans. But yeah, we have to say, well, let's be realistic. Animals, when you till soil, animals die in the production or just as you transport food across the country, you're hurting the environment, which hurts animals who live in that environment, and bugs are killed on the windshield and all of these other ways. So I think once veganism, I don't know how and why, like historically it became, well, there are self-righteous people who think they don't cause any death at all. Like some people will become fruitarian, which is fine, but even as a fruitarian, like you're taking life. You don't get to live without taking life. And I think, and that's what to this one person who doesn't eat yeast, I'm like, if you don't want to eat yeast, that's completely fine with me. There's, although from the eating disorder perspective, I was concerned, but you're going based on this assumption that as just saying you're vegan, that you're no longer responsible for death. And I think we have to accept that. We know that we are. We just don't want to take part in a direct and overtly violent system that leads to not only the needless death of sentient beings, but destroying the environment, locking up food sources, clear-cutting forests. There's so many reasons to do it. And on the bottom of my list is that I want to, and maybe this is the lack of spirituality of me, that I want to transcend my corporal body and somehow like exist on air or something of that nature. There's just systems I don't want to be a part of. I don't want to support, and that's where veganism comes in. But still, people have that perception that vegans are self-righteous and think that they aren't responsible for, having any kind of footprint on the planet. And I think I know a couple who feel that way, and I think they're wrong.
It's the same reason I'm not a huge fan of the label cruelty-free.
Yes.
Because it doesn't take into account, like the transportation, the workers' rights. It doesn't take into account like anything else,
Oh, absolutely. It could be whether it's like farm laborers or even just how people are. Nothing's cruelty free either. So yeah, I'm glad you said that. I think it's and I used to, before I went vegan, I really looked at veganism as, all of nothing. Once I become vegan, I will have reached this level of, ethicality, and that's all that's all there is going to be to it. And then so many other things in that discovery process opened up, and it's like, well, if I'm going to be vegan, it became not just not eating animal products, but like, let's say, for example, chocolate. I really don't eat chocolate anyway, so it's not that hard to give up. But if I were to go buy chocolate, I would buy fair trade, because to me, buying, I used to eat a lot of Cliff Bars, but because they're not explaining where they're getting their chocolate from.
They just did, by the way. I don't know if you heard that.
Oh, I didn't know it. What is the...
Well, so the Food Empowerment Project is one who is spearheading that, and
yeah, they've done a great job with that.
Yeah, so they finally released the regions that it's from, not exactly where. It's still not ethical. I still wouldn't buy a Cliff Bar, but at least they acknowledge the regions that it's from.
Being more transparent.
Yeah, they're being a little bit more transparent, where before it was just a wall of like, fuck you.
Yeah. Well, is it still so they don't know if it's child?
No, the regions that they say it's from, it's most likely from either child or slave labor. So I would still not buy it, but at least they got that far so far.
Yeah, to at least acknowledge that you're there.
Yeah.
And it's so strange. Like, I think Hershey's came out with something the other day saying that they're going to try to reduce child labor by 2%.
Yeah, it was in an internal document that was released by Hershey and Cadbury that their child labor, I think it was 2 or 5%, something like that, in the next like 5 years, which is mind blowing to be like, you're acknowledging child labor, but then have really horribly low expectations of reduction.
Yeah, I would actually think it would be better PR for them just not to say anything.
I don't think they were trying to. It was one of those things that just
kind of slipped out.
Yeah.
Like, we'll let a little child labor go through, but yeah.
Speaking of child labor, it's one of the funny things I like to look at. If you look at a lot of corporate policy as far as procurement and sourcing go, most companies will come out and say, oh, well, we have a policy against, child labor or exploitation. And in fine print, it always lists as defined by country of origin. If you know anything, none of these countries have those definitions, so it means absolutely shit.
Wow. Yeah, the fine print is usually where you could find the truth.
Yeah,
Yep.
yeah.
Or just follow the money trail. Usually you could find the truth when you follow the money trail, too.
Sorry. I was also going to mention that, like, just with veganism as like an ideal diet, there's no proof that it's actually like
the best
thing for our bodies, but it's just the right thing to do. And I think so I don't, I know it's the other thing. I feel like I'm just like beating up on vegans, but I also get really frustrated with vegans who, and someone else wrote this recently on a Facebook status update. I was glad to see, like, vegans who give nutritional advice and just because they read the China study or, because they read a book once, that I don't give nutritional advice, I think that's up to somebody who has studied nutrition. What I will often tell people if I'm in that outreach setting is the American Dietetic Association, which is not an animal rights group, has their official stances. You can have a healthy diet as a vegan, as a vegetarian, and as an omnivore. If you make it a point to eat healthy, you're okay from infancy to old age. Mm-hmm. So usually that's what I'll tell them. And then it's up to them to do that research if they want to. But, saying, I've heard things like veganism, you cures cancer. You can't get cancer if you have veganism. Your eyesight will get, all these false claims. I don't necessarily, and I don't do it for health reasons either. I'm not exactly the picture of health as far as my lifestyle.
Well, you're among friends then.
Okay, good.
No, I was, when, 16, 17, I was totally one of those vegans. Mm-hmm. I was like,
I was too.
Yeah, I totally believed it. I was totally like selling it. I pushed it. And I remember the first time I got like really, really sick. I think it was, I got the flu for the first time. I'm like, what the fuck? I'm vegan. Like, how can this happen?
You always thought vegans don't get sick.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
Kind of shattered that whole world for me.
Yeah, it really just, and I think it's not some people I think really believe it, but it's not an honest way to, and that's this comes down to also my problem with using religion, is I don't think it's honest. Like when people say, but what about the numbers? What about the number of people? And I'm like, okay, but it's not, you have to lie. You can do it. Like you go do that for yourself, or if you think it's beneficial, but you're lying. You have to lie about what the Bible says. You have to lie about what the Quran says or what Buddhist tradition says. You have to, if you're willing to lie, or if you're willing just to hope against hope that the Christian you're talking to is not going to look at the Bible, which is very likely because I mean, Christians really don't read the Bible, at least in their entirety, in its entirety, then if you're willing to take that risk, then go use religion. But it's just not true. And that's why I wouldn't argue. I actually argue the opposite. And I tell people, don't worry, you can be as completely unhealthy as a vegan as you can as a meat eater. There's whatever junk food you love, there's a vegan version of it. Trust me. So it's, it's funny. My partner he's an English teacher too, but he loves to cook vegan junk food, and he really doesn't care about his health at all. And we have this idea, which we would love to do, where he wanted to open a restaurant called the Fat Angry Vegan Chef, like just to blow away all these stereotypes. Yes, you could be fat and vegan. You're not a peace-loving hippie. You could be angry and hate people as a vegan, which I think some vegans do because of animals. It's like we want to blow these myths, just like the myths that I challenge in religion. I want to challenge them about veganism. I actually have a section in my book where it's called, it argues against posing veganism as a religion, and it challenges the myths of the vegan paradise. Where I just, I said, let's be honest in our activism, in our outreach, and not become another religion that makes false promises, and makes people think that they, they'll be healthy and happy and cause no death. And, all will be right with the world if everyone adopts this diet. And I think I actually had a few people who read it actually, thanked me for saying that, because I think I learned from saying it that it is a source of frustration for other vegans as well when they hear these lies being told.
I mean, we have enough real statistics. We don't have to go on to the pseudo shit that a lot of people fall back on.
Yeah.
Yeah, we have some great reasons. I mean, I think what I also argue is I don't argue for any kind of moral absolutism or moral realism. And I don't think it's unethical everywhere at every point in history to eat meat. I mean, if we were to take and that's one reason I have a problem with Gary Francione. I mean, it's just the most ignorant thing to say that you are more moral and ethical if you are vegan. But he actually writes from an absolutist point of view. So what does that say about people who live in parts of who are doing much less damage to the world by living in subsistence economies or hunter-gatherer societies? We're more moral than them because we make this choice. It drives me bonkers that the cultural ignorance and the dogma inherent in that viewpoint, I think is, and people don't want to admit, well, maybe, this isn't a moral truth everywhere at every time and every point in history. I think to kind of propagate that idea does us a disservice eventually.
There's a lot of reasons to not like Gary Francione.
Oh, that's just one of them.
That's just, yeah. What my biggest disconnect was right when he first really started gaining popularity. And I don't know, I got really mad about stealing the whole abolitionist title.
Oh, yeah, I don't...
Especially since he's like, but we're abolitionists, but then we're nonviolent. And I'm like, well, that in of itself is a privileged standpoint that you really shouldn't be taking if you want to look at the absolute freedom. In of itself, you're making concessions just by saying that. Absolutely.
And, there's a great... It's going to sound self-serving, but there's a great chapter. I didn't write it, but it's in a book that I co-edited by a writer named Travis Elise. And he says in it, it was so brilliant, a brilliant critique of Gary Francione, saying he says he's nonviolent, but if you're pursuing legal measures, he thinks the ending of property status in the law, and again, the author had some agreement with Francione on specific things, but he said if you say the law is going to liberate animals, you are relying on the violence of the state, the U.S. government as a violent institution. So you are in a privileged position that the only violence that's really sanctioned, I guess, in the U.S., and this is not something I've come up with, but the only legitimate violence, of course, is the violence of the state, and that's what Gary Francione relies on. But for some reason, he will not respond to critics. He will just, if you criticize him on his page or anything, he'll just delete it quickly, as you probably are aware as well.
Yeah. Lots of people have asked us to try to get him on, and we're like, it's not even worth the try.
I think if you wanted to talk to him about these difficult issues or challenge, he's become like, it's become like the cult of personality. He's, I don't think he'd want to answer any legitimate questions that you have.
Well, one of the things that I also wanted to bring up before we get too far where we have to quit is the idea of using sexism as an activist tool. Let's just call it what it is. Like, it's one of the biggest reasons I fucking hate PETA.
Oh, yeah. They do I like some of what they do, but I have to always stand in opposition to them because of that continued reliance on and not just exploitation of like just the exploitation of a specific female body type. It's not even, it's the thin, young, and white. And that's kind of, it's not even original. It's why don't, if you look at and actually the other important thing is, and I've looked, and I think some studies have recently come out and just kind of confirm what we probably knew is that it does not make people go vegan. Mm-hmm. It might get people to look at the website to see. Like a few years ago, they had a band for the Super Bowl ad because it was too sexy for the Super Bowl. And of course, people are going to go look, but seeing a woman masturbate with a pumpkin is not going to make somebody go vegan.
Is that what it was? I actually didn't look at it.
It was women with like asparagus and all different types of fruit. Like,
oh my God.
Yeah, it was just silly. It wasn't even like, I wasn't even offended. I was just annoyed by it. It was too ridiculous to be offended by it.
I'm literally holding my head in shame.
It made me want to not be vegan just to get back at PETA. Like, you just lost a vegan.
Well, in a strange way, like, I have to thank PETA because they're the ones that brought to me the idea that there was a huge sexist problem inside the animal rights movement. And
Mm-hmm.
it was, this would have been, I think, 99 or 2000 when they did this campaign. It was the Fur Trim campaign. I don't know if you're familiar with it.
Yeah, I am.
Yeah, and that when they unveiled that campaign, that made me realize that's just fucking wrong. Like, I don't want to be the one holding that sign and giving out that message. Like, it just felt dirty, Yeah,
and again, it's also this, this idea of what does it mean to be beautiful? As a woman, it means you should not have hair on your body. Or you should have a long flowing hair on the top of your head, and beautifully crafted eyebrows, but don't have hair anywhere else, and that's just meeting a certain vision of what beauty is.
And I feel this weird, like, it's almost like a weird admiration for some of the things they do too, because as a grassroots activist, they're one of the few organizations that you can call and be like, hey, I need to protest. And they're like, great. Here's 100 signs, Mm-hmm. But at the same time, I can't get behind half of their campaigns they do. So I feel bad even telling people to utilize some of their resources.
Well, and it's funny because I think they kind of know it because I've used their outreach network because it gets people to show up, and they've actually said, we're going to send you some anti-animal testing signs. You could just cut our name off if you want. Just trim it off the bottom. And it's like they know it. Yeah. I was like, okay. That's great.
That's interesting.
Yeah.
I haven't used them for a while. Years. Let's be honest.
No, I haven't either.
But they were never that way with us.
This was maybe one person. This could have been one person's view, but this was maybe within the last year or so. So maybe they just realized So
my question that I would like to pose to you is, I have a hard time at trying to explain to other activists why it's so bad. Like, they acknowledge, well, yeah, that's sexist, but they're like, but it's the numbers or it's the media. It's like,
no PR is bad.
Yeah, it's that no PR is bad PR. I'm like, I have a really hard time really explaining it.
Well, I don't agree with that, that any publicity is good publicity. Bad publicity has brought down has destroyed people's lives. Yeah, so I think definitely. Bad publicity can really be harmful. Mm-hmm. I think that whole idea comes from, maybe like, I'm making this up, but like 1950s, like advertising rhetoric, like Mad Men type, idea. If they're talking about you, that's all that matters. But it really does matter what people are saying. And, I think PETA, even though they have great ideas and passion and a lot of, they've come to really be seen as a joke. And, I've been in activist settings or protest settings, and I'm sure we've all been laughed at before. And it doesn't feel good to be seen as a joke. And that's kind of what they are. They're like a spectacle, Mm-hmm. And I don't think people are really impressed with that aspect of them. And there's a author named Brian Luke, and he has a great point, and I don't even remember what book it's in, but he says, he wrote a great book against hunting too, and about the male, the mythos of hunting and masculinity. And basically what he says is like, this really is a man's world when you can have, men go out hunting and, they're presented as, oh, it's natural, they eat meat and that's what real men do. And then they get vegan and vegetarian women willing to strip for them, to ask them not to eat meat, and just says, what kind of world is this when we live in, when the people trying to persuade you are just going to come in and kind of like mimic what you're used to seeing on a beer commercial or a Maxim magazine. It's all the same, Mm-hmm. So not only do you get to eat meat and hunt and all that, you get women to strip for you, trying to get you to go vegan.
I've never thought about it that way before.
Yeah. Well, that's Brian Luke. And I know it's cited in Emily Garter's Women in the Animal Rights Movement, but it was such a good point. Like, wow, it really is a man's world. That was so well said.
How do we get into like issues like intersectionality in the movement? Like,
you mean address it with people?
Yeah.
I think it's to be willing to call out behaviors. At the Collective Liberation Conference next week, for example, I'm going to be, along with atheism, I'm going to have a separate talk about ableism and ageism in the animal rights movement. And what I think is great about the conference is they are saying we want, it really is being organized by animal rights activists, but there's this concerted effort to make it about more, well, how can we connect these other issues? So I think just if somebody says something that is, racist or ableist or sexist or ageist, that we be comfortable enough to call them out. And, part of the reason I wanted to talk about ageism is just something, a woman who's, I think she's maybe in her 60s, said to me recently. She's been in the movement for years and years, and she's like, I feel invisible. And she's like, wait and see, as you get older, you are going to become invisible. And that really stuck with me, because I'm like, our whole point is to make the lives of animals visible, because they aren't. People don't want to see them. They're kept behind, obviously slaughterhouse doors and research lab doors. So if that is our goal, how do we make sure that we don't make anyone else invisible because of something as ridiculous? I turned 40. I'm 41, so I turned 40 like a few years ago. And there's the usual like teasing and stuff. And I just remember saying to someone like, it's the most ridiculous thing in the world to make fun of someone because of the year they were born. Like, what an absurd idea that is. Why should that be a point of shame? Women afraid to talk about how old they are and things of that nature. And that I'm like, well, maybe it's time to challenge that. And maybe I wouldn't have come up with that if I hadn't, when I turned 30, people were like, oh my God, you're reaching a new decade. And, this sense of, and also people not feeling welcome, not even intentionally, again, in certain activist settings, like when we're thinking about who are we going to get to come out to an event, oh, that person isn't on Facebook, we can't reach them, or we don't need their input on what our website should look like because they're old and, they're not hip or whatever, and I'm like, these kinds of things like really started to, to manifest to me once this woman said this. And then I realized that, I have, the exception is if it wasn't for, in my experience where I live in Minnesota, if it wasn't for so-called older women, let's say women 40 and older, like some women into their 80s, I would not have anyone to do activism with. I would have people to go to dine outs with and potlucks and give talks. But as far as street line activism, it's only women of a variety of ages, but mostly women, probably at least 30, like the low range of like 30 and older, who are doing the work. So that's kind of what my purpose is, to look at these issues, and also issues of ableism, making assumptions of what people are capable or not capable of doing because of what we perceive their abilities or disabilities to be.
Here locally, we had an incident of people jacketing a person as an agent just because they were old and not familiar. And it's
wow. That's a great yes, that's a great example of what it's the only the young, it's a youth movement. It's like, well, everything should be a youth movement because that's, you're always getting new generations in, but youth grow up, and not all youth who grow up give up. Some do, a lot do give up, and but a lot of, the people who were the youth of the 60s and 70s and 80s, whatever, 90s are still, many of them are still there working. But I think what you brought up is a perfect example of what I mean. Like, why would you want to do this unless you're an agent of the state? And honestly, I think if the FBI wanted to infiltrate, I think they would probably not do that.
Yeah. Yeah, they just they have sex and have children with people instead. Exactly,
yes. Yeah, that's exactly what they would do. So, but that's exactly my point, where, if we want true inclusivity, we have to look at all the different ways that we engage in oppressive behavior and not be afraid to call people out on it, even if it's uncomfortable or it feels like, oh, we should just, I think you can be supportive of someone and also say how you're behaving is not appropriate.
I do feel the need to say right now that, if you utilize good security culture, no matter the age of somebody, you should be fine.
Yes.
So just remember security culture, people.
Oh, absolutely. And you don't know.
No, but you made me think about something that I hadn't really thought about before. Back when I was like really organizing in the early or late 90s, early 2000s, that we would always be very, excited and happy. And this is when I'm in my early 20s, when, people of an older generation would show up, but we never were inclusive of it. And I never realized that until just now. We were never asking them to help organize. We were never getting their opinion. We were glad they were there, but never inclusive of it.
Yeah. Yeah, it is. And it does take that benefit of hindsight to really see where we've made some missteps.
Mm-hmm.
Even the simple act of inviting them to a potluck when you might not because you don't think they'd want to come, that in itself.
Yeah. I actually had this happen at a recent protest, which got me into even more legal trouble. But, one of the women who came, and again, I email her because she's not on Facebook. She's, maybe 20 or so years older than me. I'm not good with assessing people's ages. Like a kid could be 3 or 10 years old, and I don't know the difference. But, And I just remember thinking, I had this conception that she is, pardon the expression, and this is an expression Peter Singer said about back in the early animal rights movement. Oh, in the U.S., it's all little old ladies in tennis shoes. Mm-hmm. And this is kind of what I thought of this woman. I was so glad she came out because it was a home demo in a place where you're not allowed to do home demos. And she knew. So I was just so grateful. And, I had this perception, the little old lady in tennis shoes, and she, the police were giving us the business, and she was like, she impressed the hell out of me, and she broke the stereotypes that I assumed, and she just ripped into the cops. I mean, she just let them have it, and I think they were shocked as well, because they have this assumption, the younger of the groups, they're going to be the ones we're going to talk to. But this woman really just took charge, and she put them in their place in a way that I actually wouldn't have felt comfortable doing, because I was trying not to get on their bad side, because there were certain things I wanted to accomplish that day. But it's like, okay, so these stereotypes are not, they're not valid.
The most inspirational form of activism I've ever seen happened at the 2000 Democratic National Convention, and it was where the Black Bloc was marching towards the convention. They were leading the line, and an older gentleman, I would guess older than 50, just an older gentleman, walked forward, grabbed a flag that said "No Gods, No Masters," and walked right into the cops. He was the first one marching, not mask, not nothing. He's just like, "We're doing this, guys." I'm like, holy shit.
That's awesome. Like, I'm tired of, I've been to so many of these damn things where people just, it's all lip service, let's get this done, or let's just not do it at all.
It's seriously one of the most inspirational moments of my life.
That's wonderful. I love hearing that. Yeah, it's, and it's just, it's breaking the perceptions and not making assumptions, because I think I know that we lose activists by having these attitudes.
Oh yeah, for sure. Yeah.
And even the focus, like another person, I have some problems with some of the things Nick Cooney says, if you're aware of Nick Cooney.
I'm not, no.
Oh, good. I'm glad you aren't.
Was he the one that had that protest kind of against him when he was speaking?
Maybe I could see people protesting him.
Yeah. Okay.
He used to be kind of a radical, like with dreadlocks and whatnot, and then he, said we got to start wearing suits and ties and look like normal. He's actually quoted as saying, "Don't be a weirdo. Be as normal as possible," whatever. And in his book, he has a book about psychology, although he's not a psychologist. And he talks about, in activist settings, you should be sure to put your best looking people out on the front lines, because that's going to get the most attention. Put your most normal looking person. And he acknowledges, well, some people might call that lookism, but this is the world we live in. So, what frustrates me is, rather than change the world we live in, where, somebody who's not in their, someone who's older, or someone who's in a wheelchair, or someone who doesn't meet a stereotypical vision of beauty or weight, they're not, I mean, the argument that he's making is, don't put them out there on the front lines. And, I think there's also other implications in there. Like, what is it normal to look like? It's normal. We can just come up with, what does a normal person look like? And that brought up issues in my mind of age and race and ability. And, the world we live in now as far as racial issues. If a young Black male taking that, and I'm not accusing Nick Cooney of being a racist, I just think he's not a thoughtful person. But taking the fear people have, fear of the young Black male, are, saying, okay, we're going to put this person doing outreach, knowing how people respond. If we're to take that tactic, then we close the door to people being a part of our movement and being the face and the voice and the bodies in our movement. If we say only put people out there who are going to be completely, and this idea of normal also frustrates me to no end. because normal takes out, don't be in a wheelchair or have crutches or maybe talk with a stutter or whatever else is considered not normal. It completely opens up opportunities simply to keep people out of the movement.
I think I even fell into that trap. I prevented myself from getting piercings and tattoos when I wanted them, just because I knew that I would be, face to face with people who might look down upon me because of that. Oh yeah, I wanted to spread a message.
Yeah, all my early media training, they drilled that into us. I mean, that's the reason I never got pierced ears or I don't have any visible tattoos. I mean, that is the reason that, like, when I was that age. Yeah.
Yeah, and I do have tattoos, but I have them in places that I can hide them. I've just never been into piercing, so it was never a problem for me not to get them. But some of the questions that this raises, and it recently came up in just a group of activists talking, like, if we are arguing that we don't want to be oppressive, we want people to live freely, people including all species, as seems natural and honest and to them, then it's not appropriate to put restrictions on what, and only reinforce this idea of normalcy, because normal is eating meat and drinking milk, and we have to get people willing to be uncomfortable, and to see somebody who is maybe covered in tattoos and see that they are rational, kind. This isn't true with everyone with tattoos, but to break stereotypes, they're rational, kind people who, yes, I want to listen to what you have to say, and to also, do the same as somebody is, in an older body, to say that doesn't mean that they're not able to run if they have to run from the police, or that they're not, going to be able to, be a dynamic force, like kind of on the when you're engaged in street level activism. So if we enforce some senses of normalcy while trying to challenge others, I think it's just continuing to use that idea of that same oppressive tool. There's a great quote from Audre Lorde: "The master's tools will never dismantle the master's house." And when I hear people saying, "Look like a normal person," what I hear them saying is, use the master's tools to dismantle the master's house. But I think what winds up happening is we just get sucked back into this very system that is causing the problems to begin with.
I love that saying. I totally love it. It reminds me of the Emma Goldman saying, if voting changed anything, it would be outlawed.
I love it. Yes. Yeah. Actually, Emma Goldman's a great hero of mine. So
Okay.
Okay.
I totally have to go off on a tangent here for a second, or a sidebar, I should say, not a tangent. So, have you read the new Helen Mencken book, Storm in My Heart?
No, I'm not aware of it.
Okay, so are you familiar with Helen Mencken? I wasn't before it came out.
No, I don't. I'm not even familiar with the name.
She was Johann Moos' partner. Is that ringing a bell? She lived with Goldman and Berkman when they were in their early 20s.
Oh, okay.
And early activism. Yeah. And there was a person who was doing a biography on Johann Most and found her writings. Basically, it's like her journal or criticisms of the early movement, but it was only in Yiddish, and it was published in a Yiddish journal, but it was never been translated out of Yiddish. And AK Press just barely released it. And it has some scathing criticisms of Emma Goldman that have never been taught before.
Wow, I want to know.
I'm like halfway through it right now, so I don't know too much, but she is not a fan. Like, she felt like
she was like treated as a child.
She was treated as a child, was looked down upon. She was looked down upon because she had to work because her father couldn't work, and so like she was looked down upon because just a whole bunch of really interesting things. That how Emma Goldman viewed relationships, that like she told Helen that she couldn't have a relationship to the level that she had relationships because she wasn't on the same mental level as her.
Wow.
Basically saying like she couldn't have multiple men. Again, this is just one person's journal
but
perspective, but interesting.
I don't doubt it. I mean, I don't doubt, so many of the heroes, that we still, that who are heroes and have done wonderful things, have also, there were other elements of their character. And it's just so disappointing to hear, like I was citing Elizabeth Cady Stanton for her commentary against, as a suffragist and whatever. And I had a, like in a book, and I had a footnote, oh, by the way, she was a racist as well. So there's this idea of, I think as long as we're honest and we acknowledge that these people were not flawless, and some people just could not see, like, the most obvious and persistent example are instances of sexism amongst, some of the greatest male leaders of Western history, well, not even just Western history. Like I've heard like Che and Martin Luther King Jr. and Gandhi, and they were all sexist,
Oh yeah.
It's like, and just they had these, just at that time, for whatever reason, their history or the culture, they could not see. And I think we see that in the animal rights movement, like so many accusations of, abuse against women and sexist, men behaving misogynistically against women, especially some of the, I'm not going to start name dropping, but some of the bigger names in the movement. And it just like, I've gotten used to it, so it doesn't surprise me anymore. But it's like, how could you be opposed to the oppression of other species and be such like a unapologetic sexist, and in sometimes actually violent towards women? How can those two sides of you exist? And that actually, rather than just pointing the finger, it is what is leading me to do this talk about ageism and ableism, because up until recently, I didn't realize so much of my language and the things I said were very ableist, not thinking that, so if someone were to, I don't know, if someone was secretly taking notes over the past few years, like they could easily find things. And I want to, I'm going to be honest, like when I give my talks, things that I've said or done, which can be construed as she was kind of a crappy person sometimes. And she said some really bad things about people based on, like things like calling, like using the word retard or something like that, and not realizing that there's a problem there. So it's like this ever-growing way that I'm kind of learning to challenge these oppressive ideas that I just think, oh, come on, I'm not making fun of retarded people when I say retard. I just am saying, it's just a word. But no, it actually really offends people who have, let's say, cognitive disabilities. And it would be hurtful for someone to hear that. Well, then I do have to challenge some of, the word choice that I use and some of the ideas that I have.
I kind of have a love of pointing out the flaws of people that hold up as heroes, like the whole heroification of people.
Yeah.
More so than not just to degrade people. It's the idea to show them that everyone is, not perfect. And that means that you can achieve anything that you think that any of these people could, because you're not perfect either.
Yes. Yeah. And you can see that, and you can maybe even do better.
Yeah.
Like if Emma Goldman, which I think it's completely possible, if she was saying, you can't have access to this or that because of your mental abilities. Like, I want to be better than Emma Goldman in that way. I want to do, even though I can admire some things she said, I mean, she wasn't vegan, so I can do better that way as well.
Well, and it's a really interesting book. I'm hoping to finish it probably this week. It's really small. I just haven't had time to finish it, but it's called Storm in My Heart, if you're interested, on AK Press.
Yeah, you said Story of My Heart?
Storm
of My Heart. Okay,
yes.
Absolutely. More so than just reading the works of people who I admire and I like what they have to say, I want to be able to read critiques and say, hey, some of what they said is great, doesn't mean they were a perfect human. If I only cited or referenced perfect human beings, I would never do anything because that doesn't exist.
And then I believe most of what she wrote down was like 40 years after the fact also. So
Okay, interesting.
it was a really interesting little anthology. So yeah.
Great. I'm definitely gonna get it.
But wow, we've been going for quite a while. I didn't realize how late it is. We're way over an hour.
Yeah, it's good conversation. That's what happens when there's good conversations.
No, I have totally loved it. How can people follow you, get a hold of your work, and see what you're doing?
You can. I always just tell people to Google my name. If anyone was interested in any of the writing, my most recent book is Animal Liberation and Atheism. If you were just to Google Kim Socha, Kimsocha, I don't have a website, so Kimsocha, because as I've noted elsewhere, I've Googled myself to see what happens, and my Amazon page comes up if people were interested in any of the ideas, and you could see how the different books and the different perspectives. That would probably be the best way. If I don't know when this is going to air. I'm assuming this isn't live.
No.
Yeah, good. I'll if anyone's in like the Long Beach, California area, I'll be at the Collective Liberation Conference, which is happening from I think the actual days of the conference are the 21st and 22nd. So I would love, it's a free conference, and I'm going to be talking about ageism, atheism, and ableism, not all at once, but it would be great if people just came out, and also there's a protest involved, and there'll be a good sense of community there as well.
Well, awesome. Will we end every episode saying fuck, shit, damn? Would you mind saying it for us this week?
Sure. Fuck, shit, damn.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much.
All right. Thanks for having me, guys.
This week you heard,
Ike's Mood 1 by the Visioneers.
and right now you're listening to
Versus by Russian Circles. iTunes. Super important. I hate how important it actually is, but it really helps us out. It's the main way most people listen to the show. When I mean main, it's like 60-something% when you look at it. To drive more traffic, go rate and review us. Subscribe to us. Steal people's phones. Do that to them. Log on to computers. If you're at a university and someone leaves iTunes logged in, just do it. Just check it out.
If somebody has an iPad that they use for transactional purposes, just get on their podcast app and subscribe.
Great place to do that is the Apple Store. People log into their accounts all the time. Just go to an Apple Store, open up iTunes. If an account's logged in, boom, 5-star us. It's pretty simple. We're not asking you to spend money on there. You can't anyways unless you have their password. But don't do that. Just 5-star us. Subscribe. It's the gift that keeps on giving.
And if they don't like it, they can always unsubscribe. It's not like you're being an asshole.
They're the asshole.
Yeah, because they should have subscribed in the first place.
Exactly, fucking assholes.
Mom.
We also have social media.
Yeah, if you haven't been our friend, like we mentioned at the beginning of the episode, please find us on social media. You can go to whichsidepodcast.com, click on the social tab. Be our friend. Follow us. Like us. We often say things on there that we don't talk about on the show, so check it out. Learn something. Say something.
Be part of our community.
Talk to us. We'll talk back. Say something unique and we'll retweet it if it's unique enough.
Or really say the same old stuff that everyone else says and says, please retweet. We'll probably retweet it.
If you want to help us out in other ways, just go to whichsidepodcast.com, click on the fist, and join our street team. All you need...
Yeah, just print out some flyers, keep them on you. Super simple. You go out to a restaurant. Obviously, it has vegan food, if you're cool like me. By that, I mean vegan, right? And just drop one off. Drop a couple off. And they're like, how many in your party? You're like, oh, there's just us. Drop. Like that.
If you have a local info shop that you like to go to, drop some off there. If you're tabling at an event, put some up.
Put some up. If you can't afford printing and you want to do it, drop us a line.
We'll send some out to you.
We'll send some out to you. Because doing Kinko's runs is harder than it used to be 15 years ago.
It is.
Fuck shit damn.
Fuck shit damn.
We need a social media intern to join our team. If interested in becoming activist famous or a level 5 vegan, hit us up on social media. Which Side Podcast is hosted and produced by Jordan Halliday and Jeremy Parkin of the Which Side Media Collective. with web design by Jordan Halliday and sound design by Jeremy Parkin. Booking by Mari Halliday. Theme music by Commandantes. Go to wishsidecollective.org to check out the other shows in the collective. As always, fuck shit damn.